Throughout Corvette's 65-year history, there have only been 5 chief engineers. Each one rose to the challenges of their time to bring the exact combination of skills Corvette needed to keep going. Zora Arcus Duntov was a racer and an engineer who took Corvette from a 6-cylinder sleeper to a real sports car. Dave McClellan used science to retake horsepower robbed by regulations, restoring Corvette's reputation as a performance icon. Dave Hill made every Corvette a track-ready street car that would go on to prove itself on the world stage of Le Mans. And Tadge Juchter's team would elevate the Corvette to the supercar status that all who came before him worked for it to become. During Corvette's 6th generation, leading into the most difficult time in General Motors history, comes the 4th chief engineer of Corvette and our 2nd inductee into the 2018 Corvette Hall of Fame, Mr. Tom Wallace. Growing up, Tom's love for cars was clearly evident as we went from playing with toy cars to becoming the family mechanic.
Well, at an early age, I already knew how much I loved cars, and the way I actually became more of a mechanic was my dad had an Opel Kadett, and it always was breaking down, and you know, he was very frustrated and he was not mechanically oriented at all. So we went and bought an Opel Kadett parts car, and I was a self-taught mechanic of being able to take good parts off the spare Opel Kadett and put it on the broken Opel Kadett so my dad could go to work. And one of the things, though, that I convinced him to do was back then, your car was really a cool car if you had racing stripes on it. So I went to the hardware store and bought electrical tape and proceeded to put a double-wide racing stripe down the middle of this Opel Kadett.
Before he had a license to drive, he had built himself a street racer that was pretty hard to beat. There was never a doubt in Tom's mind that his future would be aimed at the automotive industry.
We learned about this school called General Motors Institute. I was lucky enough to get into GMI, sponsored by Buick Motor Division, and eventually that led to working on the Turbo V6. And one of the first things that I had to do with the Turbo V6 was a small team and I had to make the 1976 Indy 500 pace car. And that led to many, many more pace cars that I participated in while I was at General Motors. The chief engineer at Buick at the time was Lloyd Royce. He said, do you think we could productionize that Turbo V6 and put it into production? And we said, well, we can try. And he said, well, I want it done in 9 months. And it was like, oh, I see. So the team and I tackled that, and sure enough, next thing you knew, we had Grand Nationals, and the culmination, of course, was the low volume build GNX. It was fantastically fast at the time, and even in fact, 1 year was faster 0 to 60 than the Corvette.
Tom wouldn't slow down the Buick even when asked to, but challenged Corvette to go faster instead, and it did. It was that kind of thinking that ended up making him vehicle line executive and chief engineer of Corvette.
When he first came to the team, they had no idea what Tom's operating style was like. He's a very collaborative leader, so he wanted to engage the team in all of the aspects of the development of the product. When we started working on the Blue Devil, it was pretty challenging from the standpoint that we were going to create a Corvette that had never had this much horsepower, never had this level of speed capability, a car that could do over 200 miles an hour.
So Tom was so passionate about the car, so that internally, if we had any roadblocks, I think he used to call himself the 500-pound gorilla. So if there was a roadblock, somebody was not getting us what we really need to make the Corvette special, bam, down that roadblock would go. Tom would bowl through it, and it didn't matter who was in his way. He wasn't fearful at all. So, they kind of call it organizational agility. Well, he had that gorilla's agility. Man, he would go right to where the problem was, right to the source, right to the people, and he would power through that and get us exactly what we needed.
With the ZR1 well underway by the time Tom joined the team, he found different ways to contribute to the effort.
You know, Tom brought a lot of automotive passion, a lot of performance passion to the team, and he demonstrated that right away by wanting to be involved in all the track activities. Obviously, he's a very capable driver, you know, certified to the highest level. So he was one of the track pack, you know, all the guys that would go to the track and do the hardcore testing. He wanted to be behind the wheel. And we discovered some unique things because of his driving, actually. And so we ended up actually having to modify our validation a little bit to account for people who drive like him.
Tom saw the best way of taking Corvette into the future was to help those who designed and engineered the car to see the Corvette the way the customers do. This led to some on-the-job training, on track.
I heard about Rock Linkoff's high-performance driving events sponsored by the Corvette Museum, where in fact the racetrack would be rented and Corvette owners were invited to come and learn more about their vehicles, how to drive them at speed safely, in a safe manner. And I thought that was very interesting. First of all, it was an opportunity to talk to actual Corvette customers, and secondly, it was an opportunity to take the Corvette team and have them have exposure to Corvette customers that really did track their vehicle.
It was a plus for the GM people who got an eye-opening view of what the car was A, capable of, and B, what was necessary. And of course, all the enthusiasts were just blown away by having direct access, sitting in a classroom, and the guy next to you could be the guy developing the brakes for that car. So the information flowed both ways. And of course, from our point of view at the museum, this just increased the popularity of the events so that when registration would turn on for an event, say like at VIR, 10 minutes the system crashed because people couldn't wait to sign up. So I think there was a value that went not just to GM, not just to the events department, not just to the enthusiasts, everybody. This was one of the few win-win-wins that you can look at and say, that's all it was. There was no downside.
We had an event at VIR, and it was the first year they brought the ZR1s out. Tom entrusted me to take these guys out as one of the few people outside GM to drive this, brand new ZR1 that wasn't even in consumer hands yet. But what was really special was seeing these engineers that worked in the studio and built this, dream car for people like me, but never got a chance to experience it at speed. Yeah, and they may have had a, car for, the parking lot or drive it to and from work, but actually go on a racetrack, okay, with, a decent driver and to just run through the gears and get, over 160 miles an hour and seeing their faces like, holy cow, this is what we built. And they actually experience, it's analogous to, building the space shuttle and taking a ride to the moon. You don't really appreciate it till you're in the seat. And that is something that I will, cherish Tom's trust forever, and remember the, culture that he brought, out of the studio into the racetrack.
It was so important to me to try to understand the manufacturing process that I came back several times and spent a lot of time in the various parts of the plant. And I was able to do that because of Will Cooksey, who was just fantastic. And he and I believe, developed one of the great relationships in General Motors between a chief engineer and a plant manager to be able to do a great vehicle. I also had a good opportunity at one of our first driving events to be able to take Will for a ride in a Z06 at the time, and actually was one of the prototypes for a ZR1. And Will, who is a drag racer also, and is accustomed to speed, I felt that I could probably go 9/10 at the track with him in the vehicle, and I did. And after the drive, he got out and he said, "I just can't believe it." And he went on to tell a lot of people about, you got to go ride with Wallace. He's crazy.
Since I'd heard that he's a race car driver, I had him take me around the track, and I tell you what, I know now he is a race car driver. He gave me some white knuckles there, and white knuckles on me, that means I squeeze them tight, brother. But I found out that the cars will do a lot more than what I anticipated.
Taj took me under his wing and helped me get oriented to the team, and I have to tell you, that's the best team that I've ever worked with in General Motors. And it didn't take long for us to gel all together. and continue to make great Corvettes.
I really owe the best part of my career to Tom Wallace. It wasn't long after Tom came to us that he went back to Bob Lutz and said, you know what, Tad is doing a chief engineer job on this car. We should recognize that. So obviously, being on Team Corvette for a long time, it was my dream to be the chief engineer, to be the person to help guide the team to ever greater achievements. If it wasn't for Tom, I wouldn't have been in that position, but because he did go to bat for me, I was officially inside the company a chief engineer, and so when he retired, I already had the reins, I was already in the position, there wasn't a big, headhunter search for who's going to be the next chief engineer, I was already it. I have to say, it's the highlight of my career, being able to take the team, be able to introduce to the world a new generation Corvette, the Stingray, Grand Sport, Z06, and now the ZR1 to great acclaim. So in a lot of ways, I think Tom Wallace was the root of the development of what you see on the road today.
Because he came in a great period of Corvette. We were just moving to the ZR1. Super high performance motor. We had been working on that project for a long, long time. That was going to utilize high performance Michelin tires. And quite frankly, without Tom's effort, we probably wouldn't have Michelin tires on our production cars today. It also overlapped the introduction of Jake as our team mascot. And I'm here to tell you, Jake was not universally accepted within the GM family. Tom was not one of those people because, as I said, Tom was a racer. He loved Jake. He knew the value of Jake. And he took it upon himself to emboss a giant Jake logo molded into the air intake on the ZR1. He never got approval for it. He never presented it to anybody. He just had the engineering staff do it. And when the first ZR1 rolled off the line on that plastic induction ductwork, vacuum formed right into the top of that was a big old giant Jake. He and I had that between us just as our own personal thing. And as it became known and the story spread throughout the engineering staff, it became one of those great moments in automotive history where he was able to do something on his own that he knew was right, didn't get approval, and we made it happen. To this day, until this video is made, I'm not sure there's GM executives know that Jake's embossed, vacuum formed into that air intake on that original ZR1. Tom, way to go, buddy.
Oh, and he's the two Corvettes absolutely together through the tri-oval. Was there a touch there between the front of Antonio Garcia and the back of Ollie Gavin? Here he comes, he's got the run. He's got it down the inside, but Ollie Gavin moves him across. He's underneath the line. He's had to go back across to the right-hand side. He's slowing down. Babini's slowing down. He has. There's drama. Fabio Babini in the 20th Lambo is slowing down. Rene Rast is going to go back to the lead. The two Corvettes are side by side and through goes Antonio Garcia. And he's wide in turn one. Through back goes Ollie Gavin.
And out of the banking, here we go. This is GT Le Mans at its finest. These two Corvettes side by side at the line. It is Gavin and Corvette number 4 winning at Daytona by what? 3-4 feet over the team car of Antonio Garcia. 34 1/1000ths of a second as Corvette goes 1-2 here at Daytona.
Well, it's the 20th year of operating the Corvette racing team for Pratt & Miller. One of the key figures in taking us to this point was Tom Wallace. He believed in what we were doing. He believed in racing as a way to display one of the great cars ever made. And we want to thank him for everything he did, both for us and for Corvette.
What Tom did for the race team, here we have been going on for, I think, 20 years now, and Tom was just a big part of that. Tom was a real racer. He had driven race cars, he had competed before, so he understood what it took to win. So I apologize for not being able to be there tonight, but Tom, I want to congratulate you for getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. It's fabulous. You're a guy that certainly deserves it. So Tom, congratulations for induction into the Hall of Fame. The team here at Corvette Racing wanted to say congratulations. So here we go. Ready, guys? Hurrah!
For giving Corvette and the Corvette team a fresh infusion of racing DNA and making the customers a part of the development team on tracks around the country. We welcome Mr. Tom Wallace into the 2018 Corvette Hall of Fame.